What is the most pretentious movie you've ever seen? Basically, Julia Roberts is unhappy and goes to 3 different cities and gets her back blown out by 3 different sexy dudes. Not trying to shame here. It's just lame how they try to weave in some spiritualism and philosophy with it. It's a nothing movie about a midlife crisis. The only takeaway is that if you're unhappy you should have an expensive drop everything midlife crisis, I guess, if you can afford it. The whole thing is what I imagine Karen's daydream about. There are plenty of male equivalents to this, so whatever let people enjoy it is what I say. The Discovery, 2017 movie with Jason Segel and Robert Redford. Main character's dad scientifically proves there is an afterlife, and the world immediately is besieged with an astronomically high suicide rate because of this discovery. It's just disappointing because what could have been a very profound film was distilled down to an extremely up-its-own-ass film about guy trying to save a girl from insert unfavorable outcome here. He has a very distinct style that if you aren't into you probably won't like any of his films. The same way if you aren't into Wes Anderson's style you just think all of his movies suck. Reddit seems to not like his style. Part of that is probably because he's a creep in real life. Personally, I love his style and Annie Hall is a terrific movie to me. I don't think Star Wars is anywhere close to it, but it just depends on what type of movie you like and if his specific style rubs you the wrong way or not. Okay, so I watched Mother shortly after it got put on the Prime, and I'd never heard or seen anything about the film, other than Prime had it categorized as horror. Dude, when I tell you I was screaming at my TV for Jennifer Lawrence to have just one normal reaction, that is no exaggeration. I was beyond irritated watching her just act confused and flustered. Obviously it's all in the name of the allegory, but it was infuriating watching human characters behave so unnaturally for a 2+ hour movie. Thank you. I had one friend that loved it and insisted I just didn't get it, so I had him explain it to me. He couldn't. Everything he said, I was able to poke holes in or show how it didn't make sense or didn't even happen in the movie. Finally he had to admit that he didn't really understand it and just really liked the visuals. There's nothing to understand. The plot pretends to be convoluted, but in reality it's held together with a very thin string, and the word algorithm being a catch-all term for you're not smart enough to understand, so don't try. This was my first thought as well. I remember commenting on a discussion of it on Reddit where I fully described why it has no meaning, since he basically just imaged the entire movie, and some idiot chimed in and had the audacity to tell me I was too dumb to understand it while refusing to dispute my point. Absolute waste of my time, and that movie is so pretentious it's infuriating. There was some movie with Michelle Williams where she decided to cheat on Seth Rogen just because she was bored, going off and having threesomes and stuff. Then at end she realizes she wants him back, but he refuses because he's moved on. It was framed as her being independent and liberated, but she just came off as a douche. I can't remember the name and can find it when searching. The Thin Red Line. The director dedicated a whole scene of an egg hatching in the middle of a battle scene to represent how nature doesn't care what man does and whether or not he lives or dies. Nature simple carries on. I remember watching that in the theater and wanting to scream. We get IT. It tried so hard to be deep and artful that it tripped straight into ridiculous. Edit. Spelling. Characters are intentionally pretentious for comedic effect, sure, but how is the overall movie pretentious? It's about a family with an asshole dad that end up coming back together because he's faking cancer, and they end up rebonding as a family in the process. It's pretty straightforward. I don't think it's trying to be anything that it's not. You have no idea. The 80s were properly bleak for children in the UK. I yearned to be on that show, longed for it. My sister and I must have written 20 letters each begging to be on Jim Will Fix It. Every kid in our school did the same. It was the only conceivable way of having a dream fulfilled. Our parents couldn't afford shit. Our town had no amenities, no cinema, no pool, no zoo, no parks. There was nothing. I can't express how hopeless we felt and the hope that Jimmy Civil dangled in front of us. He was like Santa Claus come to life, and in a weird way I cherished that as I grew older. They were good memories. My sister and I sitting on the floor watching TV and transfixed by this guy making dreams come true. Being told by our mother that if we ate all of our dinner then we could watch Jimmy. My dad helping me with my spelling in case Jimmy rejected my request on that basis. And then when the truth came out it actually hurt. This guy who we so implicitly trusted and admired was a monster beyond description. You're supposed to be able to fondly look back at your childhood innocence, but that innocence is what Civil preyed on. Truthfully, it felt like a part of my childhood was corrupted or taken from me. Beloved doesn't even come close. We idolized him, elevated him, but in reality he was Satan's right-hand man. How do you reconcile that? That's an incredibly eloquent response. I too remember the having nothing stage of my life. My parents would save cereal box tokens to get free toys and put stickers over the brand names and wrap them for Christmas. I got teased at school for the crappy bags I had to take my stuff in. I often wondered, why have us if you can't afford to keep us? Some guy on the TV handing out Amstrad computers seemed like an alternate dream reality. It wasn't just Jim either. I was a member of Rolf's Cartoon Club and longed to go on that show too. Talk about dodging bullets. What not to wear. Nothing like having your family secretly recording you when you look terrible and then gathering everyone you know to have a style intervention to watch said footage while two strangers pick you apart. Then they pressure you into throwing away all your clothes. I really hope they donated them, and then gave you enough money to buy like 4 outfits but only on their terms and also fuck your personal preferences and sense of style. You have to dress like a boring adult, and I ate that shit up. I tried watching that a few times. That was back when TLC was mostly good. I just hated the host's we know better than you attitude. Not that there aren't people with cringeworthy wardrobes or ones who need the guidance to glow up, but a lot of the time it was let's take you so far out of your comfort zone that even the aspects of your style that are fine, usually most of them, will be obliterated by the ridiculously unreasonable ideas we have foisted onto you. I hated that show. It was built to be relentlessly cruel under the guise of helping. When the hosts weren't being mean as hell they were doing pretty unfunny bits like, "Oh number, we're so bad at driving this golf cart around." I especially hated it after one episode where they were incredibly vicious to goth girl that had way better fashion sense than them. She wasn't even intense goth like Lisbeth Salander either. Just a bit of a rocker. All she wanted was some casual clothes and instead they tore her down over a wardrobe I'd kill to own. She had violet blue suede boots, cool ladies 90s graphic tees, leather jackets and distressed jeans. Nothing in her wardrobe would be out of fashion today. She was forced to throw away all of it while sobbing and feeling like trash. They dressed her in the latest, 2010s, spring collection and it looked awful. She was just dressed like the female host. I bet after the whirlwind of bullies passed she regretted tossing all her cool clothes. It was heartbreaking. I never watched that show again. Not only that, but the amount of things that, in hindsight, absolutely cannot have been coincidences, but rather, production doing things to create drama or get a reaction from the girls for juicy TV moments. I can recall, at least twice, girls finding out someone close to them back home died, and the photo shoot the next day is at a cemetery, or death-themed. The one with Callan having to play Wrath in a coffin that was lowered into the ground stands out to me. She did great, but did they need to psychologically play with her like that to get the emotion they wanted? Also see, saying you've been growing out your hair for 5+ years was a kiss of death in that show? Guaranteed. Tyra would give you a Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby if she heard that you loved your long hair. Also all the girls who got sick from stuff like dehydration and ended up in hospital and how they would then get praised for bravely attending panel that day. They didn't choose to attend. Production showed up at the hospital and told them if they didn't show up they would be removed from the show. Adrienne talked about ripping her eaves out so she could leave the hospital in time. I remember a girl leaving a shoot because she was sick and then being told in another season a girl was sick and she still did that shoot and got a good photo so she should have done the same. I think that's the same season and photo shoot I was talking about. Kenya was her name, I think. They had her pose as Gluttony in the coffin full of food, and then made her an elephant for a skincare shoot. It didn't even make sense because she wasn't even actually plus-sized. That was before they added that category. They were just making a plot point out of her being a size 2 instead of and asking for a cheeseburger during lunch once. I remember one contestant who was so horrified at having her hair cut short that she quit the show immediately after. When they did a reunion episode for that season, she had hair extensions put in while she waited for it to grow back. She said the haircut had been the last straw for her. There was another one where the model that won, I think 2-1 in a tie actually, was all happy and celebrating about it. Then at the last minute Tyra told her there was one condition: she had to get a short haircut. She did it. But when they showed her after, she was in tears and looked miserable. I don't think either of these models looked better after the haircuts. It was just all about drama and getting a reaction for TV. I've never seen an episode, but I saw a clip of a model losing out a round and having to go home, and her response was to stay calm and be like okay. Like she had a really good attitude about it. But the head boss model judge lady literally called her back to ream her because she didn't get upset or cry. Definitely cemented that I made the right decision not to watch that nonsense. You know, Tiffany also had known temper issues before. She worked really hard and worked through some stuff, and was really grounded and trying not to be that person anymore. The SnowRunners knew all that. I wonder if they were attempting to basically trigger her into being the old her. Imagine if she'd given in. She probably would have been so ashamed of herself later. Because even though Tyra would have deserved it, that again, wasn't who Tiffany wanted to be anymore. And on national TV, too, evil. Was she also a contestant that applied to more than one season? I feel like that gives the producers way more fuel for their storyline. But you know what? Good on her. Tyra's the one looking like a fool for how she conducted herself on that show. Segue. Let's not forget the Tyra talk show where she thought it would be cute to trick the entire studio into thinking she had rabies. I feel like I've commented on this thread too much, but there is just so much bullshit. For me, it isn't the body image stuff. Unfortunately, the modeling industry is always going to have that. When your business says beauty, it is always going to be where the pressure is. Even plus-size models are under incredible pressure to look a certain way, or it will be the shape of your nose or your age or the length of your legs. Instead, for me, it was Tyra's, but also the show's callous disregard for personal boundaries related to sex. There was always the topless episode where everyone was pressured to be naked, which now just seems explorative. I also remember instances of male models crossing the line with touching during photo shoots, and Tyra tells the girls that stopping the shoot is wrong. Instead, you should just flirt back and convince them to stop. I guess it could be looked at as Tyra giving frank and practical advice, but today it just seems gross. I can understand that. I've heard plastic surgeons talk about the fallout when the people aren't mentally prepared for surgery or if something goes wrong. Your face is a huge part of your identity, a massive part of who you envision yourself as, and the first thing others see about you. When your face doesn't look like your face anymore, it must really fuck with your head. I remember that show was supposed to be about seeing different point of view, but some of the moms went way farther than the ones they swapped with. I remember an episode where it was a wife of a family obsessed with kids baseball went to a family that was into metal. It's painfully one-sided, like the metal family is laid back, easygoing, and the baseball is clearly obsessed. When it's the second half, the wives take over. The baseball mom shaves the metal son's mohawk and immediately signs him up for a baseball league. The metal mom is like, we're gonna take a 1-week break from baseball and try some different stuff out. You are what you eat, host Gillian Keith, or to use her full medical title, Gillian Keith, was an absolute quack with an online medical qualification from a Mickey Mouse University. She pretended to be a scientist by being recorded standing around in a lab wearing a white coat, spouted unscientific nonsense that anyone who had done a GCSE in science could see through, and was obsessed with getting people to shit in Tupperware boxes. It got cancelled after the final series when you had to have her move in with you. In the last few years, she popped up again as a prominent anti-vaxxer once COVID vaccines became available. In some college class, I don't remember what exactly it was, a black student talked about the posting impact of The Cosby Show on him growing up. He was from a poor area without a lot of resources or support, and seeing a show about a well-functioning black family where the parents were a doctor and a lawyer showed him that there are other possibilities for him and helped motivate him to do well in school and go to college. When the Bill Cosby accusations broke, that kid was the first thing I thought of. I don't think I agree that it hasn't aged like milk. What McCurdy's book did is highlight the overt sexualization of some very young girls in a lot of those shows. I was an adult 12 before any of these shows came out, but my kid watched them and they were on in the background from my perspective, and reading about I'm Glad My Mom Died made me think back to what I saw on some of those shows and cringe. A lot of these comments are just name a show with an actor who did something horrible. I'd say most early 2000s shows with any CGI at all. VFX was rough even for films, and TV starting going hard into sci-fi after the 90s boom. Voyager, Andromeda and even Buffy had some horrendously ugly VFX. It also means these shows cannot be remastered as the VFX was baked into the master track and saved digitally. Even if you shot on film, you still could not get around having low-res VFX on a Blu-ray remaster. Hence why TNG got a remaster, but DS9 did not. I'm an 80s kid. Growing Pains stands out to me. I had such a crush on Kirk Cameron and it was one of my favorite shows. I caught some reruns a few years ago on a streaming channel NX. Aside from the fact that Kirk Cameron turned into a religious zealot, the female characters were constantly trying to change themselves to impress boys and there were constant fat jokes about Carol. Tracy Gold ended up with an eating disorder in part because of that. She said she used to dread picking up the script every time because she knew there would be fat jokes.